Before we start off, have you heard of psychological reactance? It means that you'll do the opposite of what I ask you. So please don't hit that subscribe button. Don't follow the show. Don't share it with a friend. Maybe if I say that, you actually will. I'm not sure. Let's get back to the episode. So you've rode an ocean. You've survived cancer. You ran a marathon at Everest Base Camp. You strike me as being fearless. But what is your biggest fear?
Probably moths.
What?
And I'm not joking. I'm not joking. It's a totally irrational fear of flapping things anywhere near my head. No, but that aside, do you know what? I think my biggest fear is looking back in later life with regrets and
Mm.
wishing I'd done something or wishing I'd, taken an opportunity that came my way. Um, and my sister talks about it as the rocking chair test. And, if you're imagine yourself in your dotage sitting in a rocking chair in your home and thinking back on your life, you want to be able to do that with pride and thinking that you've lived a great life. You've kind of taken the opportunities that come your way. And you haven't wasted a single day. And I think my biggest fear is not being in that position and looking back going, I wish I'd done X, Y, or Z.
It's so true. You definitely regret more the things you didn't do than the things that you did, even if you fail. And in fact, failure can be one of the best motivators and drivers of growth and experience in your life. So I totally
Yeah.
agree with you there. Mm.
Yeah, in fact, I read a quote this afternoon, which was the only thing worse than failure is not trying in the first place. And it's so true. You don't kick yourself if you've tried and you haven't quite made it, but you do kick yourself if you didn't give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that fantastic book, The Regrets of the Dying. And one of them is not living a life that's true to yourself, not giving yourself the chance to do these things why do you think fear holds us back? And how do you manage fear?
I think overall fear is completely natural, but it makes us feel uncomfortable. And I think therefore we shy away from it. We avoid fear like the plague if we can. Um, and as I say, that's completely natural, but it's only when like with anything, practice makes perfect. And it's only when you get used to it that you realize that it's okay. And actually, it can be used as a positive force. So I suppose, come to realize over time that leaning into fear and pushing myself outside my comfort zone so that I am, in that feeling uncertain about stuff or feeling afraid is actually the way that I then can grow and develop and everything else. And I've used fear as fuel, really. So it's almost welcoming it as a sign of growth and then doing everything in my power to prepare for whatever it is. So, for example, in rowing the Atlantic, when I first heard about it, the idea terrified me. I just imagined those massive waves and being in this tiny ocean rowing boat, and I couldn't think of anything more frightening. Um, but one of the ways to kind of reduce that fear was to really take control of my kind of physical preparation and my mental preparation to get me used to the idea of what I was taking on. And through preparing really, really hard and really, really thoroughly, it gradually, over the period of our training, which was nearly 2 years, it reduced that fear and it normalized it. So that when I got to the start line, I wasn't nervous at all. That was no longer a fear because I'd so thoroughly prepared over the previous 2 years. And that was a huge lesson for me that the things that we are initially really terrified of, we can do something about that fear simply by preparing well and by controlling the things that we can control. And in my case, for example, through the row, it was kind of the physical and mental preparation for it.
Mm. So that daily practice, that preparation, did visualization play a part?
Yeah, definitely. Imagining those huge waves.
Mm.
And then through learning how we would manage those practically day to day, it was kind of almost imagining those huge waves coming at us and what the processes were and what the steps that we would take to deal with it. But it was also about understanding the environment and understanding the sea and learning that actually those massive waves would push us in the right direction and would actually give us speed. And that can only be a positive when you're going to be out there for 30, 40, 50, 60 days. You want to get there more quickly. And so you almost start to welcome the idea of those big waves because they're going to help get you there more quickly.
Ride them like a surfer toward the
Yeah, we
other, the
totally had
opposite
to learn.
shore.
Yeah, we had to learn how to ride the waves. I'm not sure we ever perfected it, but it was
Yeah.
definitely something we talked about a lot, trying
So
different techniques.
talk us through it. What is it like? What are the emotions when you're there on the shore? You've got your boat. Maybe you could paint a picture, and those first few strokes as you set off.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, we were so lucky that we were part of a race. So there were 37 crews in our race. So it really felt like, it was a bit of a party atmosphere actually, and there was a tremendous sense of community. We were all in this together. Yes, on one hand we were competing, but actually the overriding, I think, emotion was one of camaraderie and support. Supporting each other because we're all about to set out to do something pretty crazy,
Hmm.
and everyone was willing everyone else on. And there were loads and loads of people lining the dockside on the morning of race start, cheering us on, and it was just incredible. We sat in our boats, and there was I suppose a little bit of there was a lot of excitement, not many nerves actually, but just this sort of tremendous energy and this sense that you are going to do something that almost nobody gets to do. We when we finished, we became four of fewer than 250 women in the world who've ever rowed an ocean, and so you're striking out to do something pretty extraordinary. Yes, it'll be frightening at times. It'll be tough mentally. It'll be tough physically, but I also never forgot what a privilege it was to be in that position, sitting in that boat. Taking 2 months out of normal life to go and do something so incredible. Um, so it was amazing. It really did make the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end as we got in that boat. The 10-second countdown was done, and then I was the first person in our boat to take a stroke, and suddenly we were off. And then when you could see the supporters and the dockside slipping away, and gradually you lost sight of land, and then suddenly you realize this is it. We're doing this
Wow.
thing that we've prepared for 2 years, and it's down to us now, the four of us in the boat, to get ourselves safely across this ocean in however long it takes us. And there's not many events or races where you really have no idea how long it will take you. As I say, it could have been 35 days, it could have been 40, it could have been 80 days. We had no idea. And we didn't even know that we get to the other side, because there's so much that's out of your control, like mechanical failure or the weather, that even finishing wasn't a certainty. So you literally are stepping in, or pushing out into the unknown at that point. But it's tremendously exciting. Yeah, it was just
Mhm.
this sense of an amazing adventure waiting to happen.
Wow. And of course, the big question I'm sure everyone's wondering is, did you encounter some storms?
Yeah, we did. We did. I mean, the first 3 weeks, not as many as we anticipated. It was pretty hot, pretty dry, and fairly calm, which actually made it harder. You imagine that might be preferable in terms of weather in a small ocean rowing boat. But actually, what it means is that you've got to row every single mile. You don't get any help from wind or
Mm.
waves or anything else. And it made it really, really hard. And it was quite demoralizing for a while because we were going slower than we thought we would. But then in the second half of the race, it was very much, a race of two halves. And the storm started pretty much on Christmas Eve, actually. And yeah, it became fairly hair raising, fairly frightening almost overnight, facing massive waves. There was one night when the waves were so massive that every time we put our oars in the water to take a stroke, we actually slowed the boat down. So that night we didn't row at all. And we just let the wind and the waves take us. And it was the fastest we went the entire time. Um, and there were nights when you couldn't see a thing. There was no moon. You could just hear the storm raging around you. And it was almost like your eyes and your ears were out on stalks, desperately trying to see something, desperately trying to hear where the next wave might come from that could potentially knock you overboard or turn the boat over. And those were what I call it. That was when it was like a white knuckle ride. You would grip the oars for dear life and then breathe a sigh of relief when your shift was over and you could clamber back into the cabin, having survived another shift. Um,
Mm.
but as I say, we sort of got used to that. And I think, as I said earlier, we welcomed that because we knew that those conditions were helping us move more quickly. And I think there was also an element of wanting the full Atlantic experience. And had we not experienced storms and massive squalls and rain showers, I think we might have felt a bit cheated, that we
Mm.
hadn't really tested ourselves in those conditions. But yeah,
Hmm.
we got pretty wet on quite a few occasions, especially in the second half.
Wow. And I can't imagine that feeling in the middle of the night when you can hear a wave, it's peaking up somewhere nearby, or it's crumbling, even worse, and you're
Yeah.
not sure. How does the boat stay stable in these conditions? I mean, is it
Um,
designed for
yeah.
these types of big waves and
Yeah,
storms?
they're absolutely designed to kind of almost roll over them.
Okay.
It doesn't always happen that way, and the worst thing that happens is what's called a pitch pole, where it will sort of rise up the crest of a wave and then topple over backwards.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst way to capsize. Or you
Mm.
get a beam on wave and it'll go over the other way. But they're built to self-right. They're tremendously engineered to be pretty much unsinkable. Apparently, even if they snap in half, they will float. You can't sink the things.
Wow.
Um,
Nice.
so you take a lot of comfort actually in the fact that these boats are built for these conditions, and as long as you don't let human error, come in,
Hmm.
and that can be things like keeping your cabin door open in stormy conditions, and then if the cabin's filled with water, then the boats won't self-right.
Yeah.
So as long as you kind of manage the things that you can control and you don't let human error creep in, then the boats are pretty safe. But you also have to be tethered onto them at all times.
Okay.
And that's pretty much the number one rule of ocean rowing, because if you get separated from your boat, the chances are you're not going to make contact with it again, and
Yeah.
that's game over. So from a safety perspective, that's the number one thing that we were all really vigilant about, not only if for ourselves, but checking each other. So as soon as somebody came out of a cabin, it was all eyes on them, making sure that they were tethered on.
Hmm. And the support crews, they're nearby, but obviously not too close that you could bump into them in the night, or there's
No, there
not.
are no support crews.
Oh, no
No,
way.
this is the
Okay.
thing that everyone thinks, that everyone sort of imagines that you are flanked by boats who
Yeah.
will bail you out in a
Yeah.
disastrous situation. But no, there are two yachts who, in theory, patrol the fleet, but they don't leave until the last boat is, I think, 500 miles offshore.
Mm.
And then one of them tracks the back of the fleet and one of them moves its way up the fleet. But their role isn't to help you out. It's really to take a photo of you if they see you. They're not there to give you any supplies. If in fact if you have to have help from another vessel, then you're out of the race. It's considered then a supported row, not an unsupported row.
Okay.
So
Mm.
you can row the entire race and never see another boat. We didn't. We saw a few. In fact, we had a couple of close calls, close collisions with a couple of boats
Did you?
early on,
Mm.
and we saw one other of the ocean rowing boats towards the end of the race. But if disaster happens and you capsize and you have to get into your life raft, then the protocol is that the nearest boat to you will come and rescue you. So it could be a tanker on its way to Canada, and then you have to go with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are no support boats in the race whose job it is to bail you out in crisis.
Hmm. Well, it sounds terrifying. I've spent my life surfing, and being anywhere more than about 300 meters from shore starts to get a bit scary for me. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe I need to overcome that at some point through some preparation. Um, a question. So you arrive on the other side. What are the feelings? Where did you actually land?
In Antigua, so in English Harbour, Antigua.
And that
Nice
must have been
place to
quite
go on
beautiful.
holiday.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was a way of guaranteeing a holiday in the Caribbean for me.
Yes, and I'm sure that was very relaxing. I mean, were you exhausted? And how much sleep were you getting? 5 hours at a stretch, or not even?
No, because you row the general shift pattern. We were a crew of four women, four mums. The
Yeah.
general shift pattern is 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day. So,
Okay. Right.
although for a lot of the race during the daylight hours, we reduced our rest time down to an hour. So we were rowing for 2 hours on, 1 hour off.
Okay.
So at night, you try and get as much of that 2 hour off shift asleep as possible, but realistically it's never more than 90 minutes at one point in
Mm,
time. So
mm,
you might get let's say 4 hours during the night, and then you're grabbing what you can in your daytime shifts as well. So it's tough. Sleep deprivation is one of the things that most crews fear, but I think because we were a crew of mums called the mothership, we knew that our bodies could do it. We knew that we could go night
Mm.
after night after night for weeks on end, not getting enough sleep, and that we could still carry on the next day. And in fact, we also knew that not only that, but we didn't have to then look after a baby the following day. All we had to do was look
Yeah.
after ourselves and each other. And I think that was a superpower, really, because mentally it wasn't something that challenged us, and physically we knew that we could do it. And so that, we discounted that as a negative factor.
Hmm.
Um, so when we got to the other side, yes, tired. We'd lost a lot of weight, but not as tired as you might imagine, perhaps. Not to the point of sort of physical exhaustion. But it was just the most incredible experience. A mixture of sort of excitement, pride, relief. Obviously looking forward to seeing our children and our other halves, our families. My parents came out to see us. But there was also an element of nostalgia and almost not wanting this amazing adventure to come to an end. And I think if we could have stopped the clock maybe 24 hours from the finish, we would have done, just to savor those last hours a little bit more. Because once you get to the other side, especially in our position as mums, it's straight back to being mum,
Hmm.
almost straight back to normal life again. And I
Mm.
think having trained for 2 years and had this incredible experience, we weren't quite ready. We weren't quite ready for normal life.
Yeah, yeah, that anticlimax. I mean, after you achieve the thing, it can be challenging to just go back to
Yeah.
your everyday normal life. But I suppose the adventure is always there. But now there was another storm brewing while you were crossing the ocean. Can you tell us about your cancer journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, I got, I rode the Atlantic feeling pretty fit and well. Physically, I was really robust, never missed a shift. But there was one, I suppose, niggle that didn't necessarily concern me, and it became the butt of the crew, really. That during night shifts, I just developed this tendency to need a poo during night shift.
Hmm.
And we kind of had this rule that you could break your shift to have a quick wee, but if you needed a number two, then you'd wait until after your shift. But for some
Hmm.
reason during the nights, I'd get this cramping in my tummy and I'd have to go to the loo, which was using a builder's bucket. No glamorous toilet facilities on board.
Yeah.
But we didn't think anything of it because there was nothing normal about what we were doing. We were putting our bodies through such an extraordinary experience, rowing 12 to 16 hours every day. And not even the food that we were eating was normal. We were eating effectively dehydrated or rehydrated army rations for most of it. So it was entirely expected that you'd have a change in bowel habits. So we didn't really think anything of it. We laughed it off. And I got the crew award for most likely mum to need an inconvenient poo on night shift. And it was only when we got back, when the symptoms sort of started to get worse and this cramping got worse and I'd need the loo more often during the day, that I started to think this isn't quite right. Things should be
Mm.
settling back down again now, and they're not. So I went to the GP a few weeks after getting back and was put on a sort of a diagnosis pathway to rule out bowel cancer, but it wasn't ruled out. So it was about 12 weeks after finishing the row that I was then diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer.
Mm.
But still, feeling and looking fitter and healthier than ever, really. And it was such a wake up call. When I came round from my surgery to remove the tumor, I just remember feeling compelled to put a post up on Facebook of me looking horrendous in my hospital gown with tubes up my nose, alongside me having just finished the row, to show the juxtaposition of the two things and to, I suppose, raise awareness that cancer is indiscriminate. It can happen to anybody at any time in their lives. And just because you feel or look fit and well doesn't mean that there isn't something going on deep down. And I wanted to, raise awareness of that and help other people seek an early diagnosis, because it's early diagnosis and jumping on your symptoms that results in better patient outcomes and saves lives.
Mm.
So that threw me headlong into the next massive challenge. But in many ways, I think the Atlantic had prepared me well for it, because I knew that I was physically and mentally robust. And whilst I was facing a different challenge, I could kind of draw on that resilience and that mental and physical strength to get me through this next challenge.
Mm. Yeah, you never expect it as a younger person, and especially something like that. And I'm sure that your diet was good, and your exercise was there. It's just, yeah, one of those things that happens.
Absolutely, it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean, in terms of risk factors, I was as bad as low as it gets.
Yeah.
But yeah, there it was,
These-
and it was fairly advanced. It wasn't, it wasn't even early stages. It was
Yeah.
fairly advanced.
And did you have to go through chemotherapy and other treatments, or was it just surgery?
Yeah, so I had surgery and then about 4 months of chemotherapy, um, and my treatment finished. So I finished the row in January, started treatment it was diagnosed in May, and then treatment from June to December. And I'm still being monitored now. So I'll be monitored for 5 years. So I'm about halfway through that period of being monitored now. So regular scans and bloods and, yeah,
Yeah.
colonoscopies.
Yeah. Okay. So if anyone out there has unusual cramps or pains, don't just ignore it. Just go and get a check, because you'll probably be glad that you did. And if it's nothing, it's nothing. That's fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. If it's nothing, then you've got the reassurance that it's nothing. But the worst thing you can do is to think it'll get better
Yeah.
and to leave it. Yeah.
So tell us about the next challenge, Everest Base Camp.
Yeah, but that was linked to the cancer, really. My oncologist said to me when he was talking about being monitored for 5 years, he said, look, the chance of recurrence is greatest in your first 2 years. So at 3 years after treatment, have a party, and then at 5 years, have a big party. And I took him sort of at his word, but added my own twist to it. And so the Everest Marathon was celebrating or marking 3 years since my diagnosis, which was the 20th of May. So yeah, I was midway through the trek to base camp on the 20th of May, and I just thought, what a brilliant way to mark being fit and strong and healthy again. Um, and being in such an inspiring environment, in the foothills of Everest. But also, what a way of, I think, giving hope and inspiration to other people who might be going through a similar journey, to show them that it doesn't have to be the end of your hopes and dreams, and it doesn't have to mean that you stop doing the things that you love, and that you can come through these things stronger in the end. But it was also, I think, about proving to myself that I was better, and giving myself another different challenge, because I didn't know, I'd never done anything at altitude before. And so, a bit like the row, it was about learning how to, how my body would cope with that. It was about preparing for another big challenge and getting myself super fit and strong again.
So had you been training in advance for the marathon, or have you got a baseline fitness that enables you to do such things?
I think I decided to do it at the end of January, and the marathon was the 29th of May. So, but I've always kept really fit and strong. Even through my cancer treatment, I carried on running and kind of working around the limitations of chemo, and I had a PICC line in my arm. So I never fully lost my fitness, even through the illness. And so I had a pretty good base level of fitness. But I just then had to tailor it and adapt it to altitude training and marathon training. And actually, training for a marathon at altitude is quite different. So there was a lot of technical training. So I used a hypoxic tent, and I slept in a hypoxic chamber, if you like, for a month beforehand, to get my body almost pre-acclimatizing to the altitude, to give me the best possible chance of not coming down with altitude sickness and enjoying the experience as well as completing it. So yeah, I definitely ramped up my training, and I started doing different types of fitness. But I was fortunate to have had a good base level already.
Okay. And what's the track like? Is it a loop, or it's obviously trail running, or are there roads?
Yeah, no, it's all trail running. So you trek to base camp, and the Everest Base Camp trek is quite a common route. It's quite a popular route, but there are no roads. It's all yeah. The only way of getting to base camp is to walk. So it's a 10-day trek to base camp, and then the marathon starts at base camp, and then you sort of make your way down. But I think in your heads you imagine this is a downhill marathon, is a downhill race. But actually, what I don't think most of us appreciated was that there were 3.5 kilometers of uphill as part of coming down.
Okay.
So it's pretty grueling. And then the race finished in a little village called Namche Bazaar, which was about halfway along the trek. So you kind of walk all the way up, run halfway down, and then you either trek the remaining distance down to the airport, or you get a helicopter or some other way of getting down.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, what an
Yeah.
experience. What a spectacular place to do it. I've spent quite some time in Nepal, but I didn't get to that part. But it really is a special place to be, never mind to do something quite extreme.
Yeah, and the whole experience from end to end was amazing.
Mm,
And I think what made it wasn't just the environment and the inspiration of being, surrounded by those incredible mountains, but it was the people. They have
yeah.
such warmth and generosity. Nothing is too much trouble. So positive, and giving. And I think there's
Mm,
so much that we can all learn, about them or
yeah.
from them.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. It's just that smile and it's authentic. It's not
Yeah.
just, you're a tourist and I might be able to get something from you. It was I'd never experienced anything like that.
Yeah,
And
it's so genuine. And, these people have very little themselves, but they're
yeah,
very happy to share whatever they have with you. As you
yeah.
say, not expecting anything back in return.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was a heartwarming experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you think you developed this mindset of I want big challenges? Tell us about young Felicity.
I It's hard to pinpoint really where it comes from, but I'm the middle child of three. I've got an older brother and a younger sister. And I'm sure that has a factor in it, because almost from birth, I was sort of brought into a competitive environment, competing with my siblings, whether it be for the best, I don't know, the best seat in the car, or the TV remote control, or the biggest piece of cake, whatever it might have been. There was an element of competition in the house from word go. And I think I was, being younger than my brother, I was always trying to kind of keep up with my brother and his mates, but also I was always trying to keep one step ahead of my younger sister. And so that just kept me on my toes, and I think kind of fueled this desire or this need, for kind of pushing myself and challenging myself. I think I was always encouraged to do it, not pushed into it by my parents, but encouraged to take up opportunities and to try different things as well. And I was lucky to kind of try lots of different things through school. And then when I was 24, I did the London Marathon. And again, that was something that absolutely terrified me when I first decided to do it. I remember
Yeah.
waking up in the middle of the night with cold sweats, just the fear of, what have I done? What have I signed up for? And so that was one of the first kind of times that I really, felt like I was pushing myself way outside my comfort zone from a physical standpoint. Um, and I absolutely loved it. And I did better than I thought I was going to do. I did better than other people thought I was going to do. And it showed me that if I train for something and work hard, I can exceed not only my own expectations, but others' expectations. And that becomes slightly addictive, because you think, well, if I can do that, what else can I do? And one thing leads to another. So that led to doing triathlons, learning how to swim properly for the first. I could swim, but I'd never learned really proper competitive
Yeah.
swimming. So
Hmm.
I had to learn that, and road biking. Yeah, and as I say, one thing led to another. So that led to a half Ironman and a quadrathlon. And each time you achieve something, you think, well, if I've done that, then I can do something different. I can do the next thing. Um, but then there was a small spanner in the works. After my first child was born, I started to get quite a lot of hip pain. And I thought I'd probably just ignored the doctor's orders and gone for a run too soon after giving birth. But after about 3 years of fruitless physiotherapy and not being able to kind of get my hip back into full working order, I was told I needed a full hip replacement. So 2 years before the row, I had a full hip replacement.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, but again, that was, I think a lot of people might think, well, that's the end of physical challenges. That's the end of running. That's the end of, challenging yourself physically. But for me, it became this enabler to get back to doing all of those things again, because I hadn't been able to, run long distance or do much in the way of exercise with the hip in the state that it was. But suddenly, I had this brand new shiny hip. It wasn't giving me any pain, and it was a reason to commit to the road, to say yes to doing something wacky rather than an excuse to say no. And that ability to kind of almost reframe is something that has stayed with me ever since. It's about, turning challenges into opportunities or looking for the positives rather than the negatives, which is, again, it's another superpower, I think, being able to do that.
Mm-hmm. There's another remarkable achievement, which is writing a book. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so my book, I published my book in July of this year, and it's called Stronger Than the Storm. Again, it's something I never imagined doing. A few years ago, I would have, if anyone said, everyone says everyone's got a book in them somewhere, and I would kind of poo-poo that and say I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than write a book. But at that point, I didn't have a story to tell. I didn't know what I would write a book about. But I suppose life gave me a story, and I just sort of felt compelled to write it. After my cancer treatment, I left my corporate career to become a professional speaker because so many people said to me, "You've got a really inspiring story. Have you thought about sharing it?" And I realized through speaking that it genuinely can help people. Everyone goes through challenges. It might be a physical challenge, it might be a mental health challenge, professional challenges, whatever. We all go through these ups and downs. And actually, in sharing our personal experiences and stories, we can really help other people who might be struggling. And so it's through the speaking and realizing that my story and experiences can help others that the book almost became the logical next thing to do, to enable me to sort of go into more detail about my experiences and the lessons that I've learned, and how I've dealt with various challenges over time. But it's very much it's not a woe is me story. It's very much a story of hope that we can all come through adversity stronger. And, I share some of the ways that I've done that. So very, very surreal moment, I suppose, publishing my book, but very proud of it as well, and getting some amazing feedback, which is very humbling. Exciting times.
Excellent. And standing up on a stage in front of an audience, how was that moment?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest fears. I think it's, generally speaking, it's one of everybody's greatest fears. But in many, and it's not something I particularly enjoyed doing when I was working in the corporate world. I was sort of led marketing teams for 20 odd years. But when it's your own story and your own experiences, nobody can really argue with that.
It's true.
Yeah. And yes, you get, you get nervous, but again, you realize that those nerves are a helpful thing because it shows that you care about what you're doing, and it makes you work harder and practice and push yourself and challenge yourself. And it's so rewarding, actually, when you stand up there and you give a keynote, and then you do the Q&As and you chat to audience members afterwards. And almost the most rewarding element is then hearing from people after who have listened to what I've said and then taken it on board and done something different, or thought about their challenges in a different way. And that's what I suppose inspires me to continue and inspired me to write the book, because I knew that I was helping people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is something very special about being in a room with an audience and sharing your story and it landing and resonating with others, especially when I mean, I've had this kind of feedback even a year later when someone said, well, I came along to one of your seminars and I shared this tool with my spouse and our life changed. It's like, wow, it's just, there's nothing more fulfilling than that from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's knowing you're
Yeah.
making a difference in whatever way that might be to somebody's life.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have any specific tips for someone out there who's about to engage in something that feels a little overwhelming, or that feels a little bit beyond their perceived skill level, and they want to establish a bit of presence and calm?
Yeah, I think firstly it's just trying to get that self-belief and that knowledge that you are so much more capable than you think, and that even something that feels outside your comfort zone is achievable. But with any massive goal or challenge, it's simply about breaking it down into bite-sized manageable chunks. So there was no way we could have rowed an ocean when we decided to row an ocean, but we had 2 years to prepare for it. And gradually over those 2 years we learned the skills, the mental and the physical skills that we needed to be able to do it, so that we were ready 2 years later to row an ocean. And so
Yeah.
I think it's about remembering that you don't have to have all the tools, and you don't have to have your route fully mapped out to whatever it is you're trying to do. You just need to have the courage and to be able to commit, to say yes and take the first step. And yes, it feels like a bit of a leap of faith, but know that you will figure the things that you need to figure out along the way. And it's also about not being afraid to ask for help, because I think so often, especially as adults, we think we have to do it on our own. And maybe we feel that you have to swallow your pride, but it's not that at all. People love to be asked for help, and it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength to be able to surround yourself with the right people who can help lift you up and help reach your potential. And so finding those people who can help you achieve what you want to achieve is so important as well.
Mm. Any other adventures in store that you can share?
Yes. Hot off the press. Yes. So again, sort of building on my cancer journey. Next year I turn 50, but it will also be the 4th year anniversary of my diagnosis. And I'm going to be doing another ocean row, but not the Atlantic this time, the Pacific. Or not the full Pacific,
Oh,
the mid-Pacific.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll be rowing from Monterey in California to Hawaii. In
Incredible.
another crew of women, 5 of us at the moment. So another incredible adventure. I suppose it's similar in that it's an ocean row, but the conditions are very different. It's fairly well known to be much more technically difficult, colder, darker, wetter. Yeah, more unpleasant probably.
Mm.
So arguably more of a challenge, even though it's slightly shorter distance to cover.
Yeah.
So that
Will
will
you
be in
be,
June next year.
and you'll be rowing into waves as opposed to with them, or is it are the conditions variable?
I think the conditions are variable, but I think the
Mm.
hardest time is the first sort of 2 to 3 weeks when you're trying to
Yeah.
get off the coast, and then the currents and the
Mm.
wind and the waves are trying to push you back on. So you can either kind of bite the bullet and go through them, or you can almost go with the current and the wind and the waves, and then
Down and
yeah,
then, yeah.
down to go up. Yeah. And it very much
Interesting.
depends on, I think, the size and the strength of the crew as to whether you use your brawn to plow through it, or whether you take the slightly more comfortable but longer route.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And at this point in life, what does a day in your life look like? Are you training most days?
Yeah, I'm training most days. I typically train in the mornings, early mornings, before the children are up and about, so that I can get my training done. It's a bit of me time. It's what I find anchors me, physically and mentally. I find it sets me up for a much better day. I can tackle almost anything if I've done that in the morning. It's very much what grounds me. So yeah, I do my training in the mornings, and now I'm starting to kind of ramp it up from a rowing perspective, because I know I'm going to have to do the long sessions on the rowing machine again to condition my body.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but then it's mum mode. So I've got 3 children who are 7, 10, and 12. Just gone back to school this week, so it's about getting them organised out of the house in the morning to school. And then, as I mentioned, I'm a professional speaker now, so I might be going off and delivering a keynote or doing some preparation, things like that. So it's very much a juggling act: work, family life, training. Yeah,
Training for an.
fitting as much as I can into life.
And do you go and do any ocean training before you head off to Monterey?
Yes, so it's the race rules are quite stringent, so you have to do a certain number of mandatory hours on the boat in the ocean. So our boat is on the south coast, so we'll be meeting up sort of for weekends and longer stints to get the hours on the boat and to practice the skills and the drills that we need to be able to be cleared and declared safe and ready to row the ocean.
Is it a few of the same crew members from before?
One of the same. So my sister was in the Atlantic crew with me,
Okay.
and she'll be doing it again, which is lovely. But we're actually joining forces with another one of the Atlantic crews, who we raced against. So we're coming together with one of their crew into the same boat, which will be lovely. It kind of bringing these two rival crews together for the Pacific.
And for someone interested in picking up a copy of the book, what can they expect inside?
It's a very raw, personal, emotional account of my journey, I suppose, from the formative years of childhood and kind of where I developed my mindset and my approach to life, through the row and then the cancer diagnosis and what happened after that. And yeah, so it's a memoir style book, but it also very much I talk about and share how I've coped with the various challenges and adversity, and how I've been able to kind of pick myself up through that and come out the other side positive and raring to go.
Fantastic. If people would like to check it out or check out your website, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, my website is felicityaashley.com. The book is available on Amazon and most sort of big online bookstores. But yeah, felicityaashley.com, and following me on social media. So I'm Felicity Ashley on LinkedIn and Felicity Ashley Speaker on Instagram. So I post regularly on both those platforms. And you can get links to the book through those platforms as well.
Excellent. And all of those links will be in the show notes. Felicity, any final thoughts for those who stuck with us all the way to the end, who are feeling quite inspired at this point?
I would say if there's anything that you've idly thought about doing or dreamed about doing, just do it. Just make it happen somehow. Find a way to commit to it. Say yes to yourself and take that first step, because you don't want to get towards the end of life and look back wishing you'd done it. Yeah, don't live with regret. Just seize every opportunity that comes your way and go and make opportunities for yourself as well.
Thank you so much for your time and inspiration. I'm sure many people are getting started with something that they perhaps were delaying right now. Felicity, thanks again. Great to chat.
Thank you very much, Brad. Lovely to be here.
Thanks again for joining another episode of the Brad Hook podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a comment. Let me know what you think, and do feel free to share it with a friend. Take care.